but my name is Brooke Duncan and I serve as the Director of Community Development for Uptown Consortium. And today we're here with our team at Uptown, Franz Dansbury, and a few other members of our staff, as well as Saki, to present on the innovation. We've had a few past engagement sessions with the community, and our team has updates and refined our plans as it pertains to design and programming. And so we're excited to hear from you all, hear some feedback after we hear a short presentation. First, I'm going to kick it off to Franz, who's going to give a little bit of a recap and introduce Saki.
Great, thank you. After our last engagement session, we took all the comments that were made and observations and focused down on one of the significant items that were listed. And so we looked at issues of bikeway connectivity, how that works, how it connects back out of the broader community, and then also really diving down into how do we utilize and create what we call programmable space for the end users, such as pop-up markets, small pop-up retail, those type of things, where that would work best and how it could work within the framework of the design. Then we started looking at the delineation of the spaces themselves, from the public to the semi-public to the private, and also then got into phasing and timing analysis of it. So we've worked hard on this, and we have some very, very interesting and very good graphics to show you with this presentation. It's starting to really as we say, get flesh on the bones now. And this is still in the very early stage of development, just so everybody knows, is that we're just hopefully after we finish this up, we can start moving into the schematic design phase. And so with that, I will turn over to my friends. It's Saki, and let them go forward.
Great. Hello, everybody. This is Fred Merrill. I'm here with my partner, Alan Ward, and Travis Mazeral. And I'll turn it over to Alan in just a second. But what you're going to see today is a continuation of kind of going from a larger neighborhood scale. We've showed you several presentations in the past that deal more at the Uptown, at the Avondale neighborhood scale, then down to the MLK Reading Road, the 4-quadrant scale. Today, Alan's going to really kind of jump into the actual Greenway idea, which in our last presentation you saw as more of kind of a green arrow and then kind of more of a concept diagram. Today, what you'll see is a much more kind of detailed look at it. And also, I'll turn it over to Alan. Just so you know, Alan is a Cincinnati native. He grew up there and went to the University of Cincinnati before coming out east. So with that, Alan, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Fred, and good afternoon. So if you switch to the next slide. So just to get everyone oriented, at the bottom of the screen is MLK Boulevard. On the left-hand side is Reading Road, on the right, I-71, and then Whittier Street is on the northern side. So we're focused on this quadrant north of MLK Boulevard, adjacent to Reading Road. And first, let me talk a little bit about the development and the buildings, and then we'll spend a lot of time on the design of the open spaces and the bikeway network and the kind of public benefits of this redevelopment. So at the lower left corner, at the corner of MLK Boulevard and Reading Road, is a mixed-use development of an office R&D building right along the street, and then a hotel kind of on the eastern side. And the design of this is actually still being advanced, and we'll be working with the developer to improve this, but that is likely the first phase at that southwest corner. If you go just north of that along Reading Road is another office and R&D building along the Reading Road. And then on the park side, you see the green space at the heart of this plan. That is then residential that faces the green space. And that's the only residential in this quadrant. Then on the east side, also framing corridor, the green space, are further development of office and R&D buildings. And they're supported by a parking garage on the east side here that is oriented towards the freeway so that we put buildings and active edges on the park. So the buildings open up to the park. You have good positive edges framing the public open space. So let's go to the next slide. So this will be developed in phases, and that initial phase, as I mentioned, is the southwest corner. And then subsequent phases are probably on the east side. You see the phase 2A, 2B, and then completing things would be phase 3 along Reading Road with that office R&D building and the residential, completing the framing of the open space. The open space will also be sequenced with each of these phases. So it will develop in a couple distinct phases as well. There also is the potential future development of a residential block just north of Whittier. You see it up there labeled phase 4 at the top of the screen. So that is potentially another residential building north of this quadrant and along that green space. Okay, next slide. So a lot of attention has been focused on kind of fitting into the larger bicycle network that is being planned and developed in this part of the city. So you see on the right that sign or that little label says Tawasin Way Trail. So that's a pretty significant regional bike trail, and that comes right through the heart of this redevelopment quadrant and along one edge of this green space. So that's a very important link. It connects you up to MLK Boulevard. Then on the west side, bicycle trails on Reading Road, also on Whittier. We're also planning some internal to the site as well, but you can see how this quadrant then fits into a much bigger bicycle network going both south and to the west towards the university on each side of NIOSH. So it fits nicely into this larger bicycle network as kind of a nodal point where they come together. Okay. So the streets are being slightly reworked to serve the development. Whittier Street on the north, and these are 2 to 3 lane streets. They're not really large streets, so they're compatible with pedestrians, but Whittier Street in the north. Borman comes off of Whittier and goes from the north to the south. Union Street is also rebuilt. That connects from Reading Road to Borman. And then Wehrman kind of curves around and connects up to Whittier. That gives you plenty of options when you leave these garages to either go to Whittier or to go to Reading Road. Okay, next slide, please. The parking is also off of those streets. Here's the bicycle network combined with the pedestrian circulation. So you see that important Wasson Way bike trail at the top of the screen coming right down through the heart of things. And then there is a big grade change up to MLK Boulevard. So that's why you see those little kind of jagged lines with the ramps up to MLK Boulevard. And then the other colored lines on each of the streets are other bicycle paths along the streets. And then the kind of yellow color are the pedestrian sidewalks and paths all through this district. So there's a lot of emphasis here on being able to walk and be able to bike to and from. Now, the landscape at the heart of things, Cincinnati is at an interesting location between several ecological zones. So we're aiming to do the planting with native plant materials and kind of build upon this great sort of ecological history of the city and the region in each of the green spaces. Okay, next. So now we'll turn to the park and some of the programming ideas, the design of the park. And there's 2 distinct parts. If you take Union Street, there's a zone kind of south of there, which is a relatively flat area. We call that the event lawn and plaza area. That's the area of most active use and programming. We'll look at that in more detail. And then north of the Union Street extension is an area that's a little more natural. And you see these bodies of water shown here. That's dealing with this natural drainage that occurs in this valley and making something out of it and ponding the water, making it visible. And we'll show how that works and how interesting that can be in a lot more detail with some renderings later. So let's start with this area to the south, the event lawn. So that's Union Street coming in from the left. This is at a lower elevation than Union. It's at the bottom of Union. It's also lower than MLK Boulevard. So you kind of see over this. You see it's framed by buildings, but there's a large level lawn area that's suitable for some recreation or for staging bigger events. And then a key space is right at the end of Union Street. There's a green space and a plaza area on the west side, right near the street, where you can stage events and have food trucks, or you can set up tents in the space for like an arts festival or a community event, performance space, music event. It can be sized just to the size of that green space at the end of Union, or it could be a bigger event which occupies the whole of this lawn area to the south as well. So we'll show illustrations of that going forward. Let's go to the next slide. So here's a view. We're looking north. MLK Boulevard is behind us and up the slope. So here's that lawn area. And we just showed volleyball courts here, but that could be other recreational uses. Like I said, this also could be the setting for a bigger event that will be planned here. And you see in the background at the end of Union Street, tents set up as either a market, a farmer's market, or it could be an artist fair, or some other event that might have tents set up. And that's what we're showing in the illustration here, with planting at the edges here, but kept open in the middle. So the kind of events you might see, there's a whole lot of flexibility here. You can have recreational and yoga events during the week. You can have big weekend events. You can set up art pieces like the lower left here, they're interactive. So there's a whole range of programming options for this space. Okay, next slide. Here you see some other comparables on the right, some illustrations where we've designed lawn spaces that then transform on weekends or at key times into these events. And this might even be a synthetic lawn in the center of this, because it would get a fairly intensive use through the year. And these synthetic lawns can look quite attractive. But here you see like food trucks on the right-hand slide and the left, upper left, or you see tents set up as well. So it's kind of the right scale for just these modest size events without being too big, 80 by 110 feet. And you could set up a stage at one end for performance or musical event. So here's a rendering. We're looking south. That's MLK in the background. That's a stage there set up. And here's some event going on at the stage at the end of Union Street. Okay, next slide. Here's once again that plaza space with some food trucks, tents set up. Okay, next slide. So let's look now at the northern part of this park with these water bodies. It's set up as it slopes away and goes down to the north with these little dams, or weirs as they're called. And that sets up each water body at a slightly lower elevation as the water, and it holds the water, makes it visible. And Cincinnati has a great tradition of making these ponds in parks, like at Burnet Woods or Eden Park. So it's kind of in the spirit of some of those, but smaller. On the left-hand side, you see these green spaces with the outdoor rooms. Those are little sitting areas overlooking the water. And in the right-hand side, this big curving path and adjacent to green space overlooking the water. Okay, next slide, please. The other thing that this does for us, we have all this rainwater that hits the roofs of these new buildings and parking garages and the streets. So we're directing the rainwater to this park zone. It gets filtered through plant material, goes into these ponds. It then holds the water. Some of that water infiltrates into the ground. Some of it just carries on and sort of has been cleaned by the plants, by biofiltration as it moves through to the north. So it's a way to express how the rainwater flows through the site in a kind of natural way that helps clean the water. And that could be interpreted on the site. You see people here, maybe classrooms or students understanding that and meeting at the site for a sort of an outdoor classroom on rainwater and stormwater. So here's other examples where that's been done. These can be quite beautiful when they're designed correctly. And we've done several of these where they are beautiful features in parks, but also have a kind of a stormwater function that's a good story. Okay, next slide. So here's more on this park. Obviously, we have these bike trails, the Wasson Way Trail. So signage and wayfinding is, would be incorporated into this park to tell you where you are, where the paths and connections are, but also help interpret the history as well as what's going on with the design of this park and with these stormwater ponds. Okay. Next slide. So here's a view, kind of an overview. We're up at Whittier Street looking south. So Whittier Street is just below us, the wider part of the ponds, and you kind of see how the edges are natural on one side, a little more linear on the other side to kind of vary it. You see the little dams that are created and all these kind of interesting little green spaces alongside these bodies of water that are imponded. Okay, next slide. Now we're almost the same location. You see the office buildings that are framing it that overlook this. You know, these are important because it kind of gives definition to the space. It kind of frames it. And they have views over this, but these are public spaces. Then you see the paths on the right-hand side with the outdoor rooms. And then you see those curving paths and kind of terracing of the slopes on the left-hand side, and sort of natural edges with plants and water. Another view from the other corner near Whittier, looking up along this path along the west, on the east side on the left here. Here, one other view on one of these paths, kind of looking across it. Okay. Another rendering of, the idea is to use these natural plants in really interesting ways that makes the planting a significant feature. Also, some shade would be created with the shade structure you see on the left here. Okay. Now we're looking northward. So MLK is behind us and Union Street extension behind us. You're seeing the ponds then stepping northward down the slope. Okay. And here we're looking across it, kind of midpoint, Union Street to the left, Whittier to the right. You see we're incorporating some art and sculpture in the park here, places to sit, a shade structure. This is on the side that gets a lot of sun. So this is a view from, say, one of the office buildings or R&D buildings over the park, over the public park. Okay. And then these are these little sitting areas alongside the west side of the park. And these would have tables, chairs. Some are for recreation, maybe an outdoor, ping pong or game tables. This is yet to be further programmed, but these become a different scale of space where you have these kind of little, almost like outdoor rooms with trees overhead. Okay, next. One more view along the walk here, seeing those outdoor rooms. You see the outdoor game table in one of those spaces. And this is the multi-purpose trail here that also serves as the bike trail. And here, this last view, we're on that multi-purpose trail. This connects on to the Wasson Way Bike Trail. Behind us, it goes on up the slope to MLK Boulevard. So it's multi-purpose for pedestrians as well as bicycles along the street edge here. So that's kind of the story where we are now. Like Franz said, it's been developed further. There's still a ways to go, but we've incorporated a lot of the programming ideas we heard about creating places for events, performances in these lawn areas, but also capitalized on the drainage and the water to make what we think are interesting water features in this park. So with that, I think we should open up to comments or questions.
Yes, and we'll pivot it over to Patrick, who is on the call today to help us solicit some feedback from everyone and any further ideas that you might have around programming.
Hopefully you've all seen a nice evolution from the larger urban design concept that we've been talking about in previous meetings now to a very more detailed understanding of the look and feel of the design and how it will be used by the folks that work there, live there, play there, and live nearby. So have at it.
Can you review again the phase of development for the different areas? The arrow you use to point things out is really small. And if there's a way to enlarge that for the next presentation, I think it would help people follow.
Can we go back to that slide early on?
Yeah, let me go real quick. Hold on.
I was going to annotate it, but yeah. If you just want to,
I'll go there, Fred. I'm just, sorry,
Okay, I
had to
can-
close out for some reason.
That's all right. I could draw on. Oh,
Yeah,
there we
you're-
go. Perfect. So here's phase one, right? And then this was phase two, phase three. I'm sorry, 2B, 2A, and then phase three. So you kind of see it going like that, if that helps.
Relative
help?
to those,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, this is Florence Parker with OKI. Relative to those phases, what type of realistic timeframes are underway?
I don't know. I think Franz, you might be the best
Yeah,
person.
let me, the
That one.
very first phase, of course, everything, phase one would be the first one out. And with phase one goes improvements to Union Street and also what you see there, the Borman extension. Avenue goes up to Whittier. That was required by the city of Cincinnati with the developers, which is MLK Investors. Everything was sort of put on hold during COVID because of just the commercial market, et cetera, which has actually allowed us some time working with developers and consultants and everyone to put some real thought behind this on the phasing. And then the logical extension playing off what was going to be built on the first phase, which is a necessity, moving to a phase 2A, which plays really just off the east side of that public area of the Greenway. Timing wise, it all depends when phase one kicks off. The developer and ourselves are in discussion. We think sometime next year, phase one might kick off. And then everything will come from that. Depends on what absorption would be on office space lease up, et cetera.
Thank you. This concept is most impressive. So I wish you well, but thank you.
Mhm.
A follow-up question, what is the optimistic timeline to get pretty much phase 1, 2, and 3, the whole site developed? Is that like 10 years, 5 years?
I think that phase one, if we get started next year, you got at least another year. So at least 2 years going on to 3 years to get phase one complete. And then from there, phase two, another 1.5 to 2 years at least. So we're talking a good 10, 15 years out to get everything done, realistically. Hopefully we have no more spikes in COVID too.
Thanks, that was helpful.
Hi, I have a question about retail space for restaurants. Is that part of the plan?
The retail space for restaurants, et cetera, would be up to the actual developer. He is planning some in phase one, possibly down in that little block right there. Oh, you can't see my thing, but to the
Right there.
top left corner of phase one. And so there's right there. You're looking at some in there now. We're working on this phase one plan with the developer to reflect realities now in terms of market, et cetera. So there will be some, let me just put it that way. Answer your question, yes, there will be some. Okay, we're not sure when, but we'll at least try to get some in phase one to start and then see how things develop from there. But it is a necessity to have some of that in here anyway.
Mhm. Thank you.
Mhm.
Jennifer Foster raised her hand if you want to ask your question, Jennifer.
Hello, hi, I have a question. One question I have is I see a lot of green space there. So I'm asking for community inclusion. How can we incorporate the youth and learning some agriculture or, learning to take care of landscaping and stuff like that? Is there anything with that there can be incorporated with youth or adults? Because that's an excellent trade to get into. I was once a landscaper. And
Yeah, I can. Yeah, this is Fred Merrill at Sasaki. I think there are opportunities, as Alan was showing you the different places and rooms and educational opportunities in the Greenway. There certainly would be opportunities for having agriculture at a very small scale, maybe more educational and demonstration, not anything big, but there certainly could be an urban agricultural demonstration plot and some maybe exhibits put up for that would help teach people about that and actually show them larger scale examples that are elsewhere. But there could be some micro, if you will, or small scale examples for sure.
Yes, that's opening up their brain to another occupation or career that they possibly love. Possibly could open up their own business one day. I think that'll be great.
Yeah, we thought about that too. One of the things that went through on the slides, but we want this not just to be a green space and a nice little park, et cetera, but we also want to help it inform the visitors of what is actually occurring here, especially in the water feature area with the water loving plants and the type of materials that are used and why. So we also looked at using signage to help educate and inform people with that. And then there's areas there, of course, for outdoor classrooms where a series of classes can be held. So, I mean, we've tried to make this very adaptable to many different interests.
What's interesting, just to follow up on Franz's comment, is this whole area, the whole MLK corridor, is becoming what's known as the Cincinnati Innovation District. It's really a pretty exciting concept. And when you have the university and the hospitals and the zoo and all the different institutions concentrated in this, relatively close area with the neighborhoods as part of it, you begin to, I think we need to have some very innovative and educational elements of the Greenway, because that's what this is all about: education, research, and making life better for everybody.
Along those lines, in addition to Jennifer's comments and your comments as well, that storm water management concept is impressive in terms of making use of what Mother Nature has already put in place along, I think it's Borman Avenue. And who knows, there may even be opportunities to educate in terms of the benefits of solar energy.
Oh, absolutely. You can see on those two garages, you can see solar panels on the garage just to the east of phase 2B and between phase 3. Those are solar panels. But I think your comment about stormwater is well taken, because that's another educational and even researchable opportunity. You could have the professors and the faculty at the university looking at innovative ways to do stormwater management in a very sustainable way. So again, it plays into the whole innovation district theme of the entire corridor.
And then also trying to work through is that, solar panels, solar arrays, not just the panels we see nowadays, but, examples can be found where the panels are actually in place as part of the facade of the building as well. And which is very interesting. And then maybe we look at green roofs on these buildings, those type of things. So, I mean, this is more than just a little park, as I said, okay? This is now becoming an open air classroom for many people.
And then Miss Jones, if you want to ask your question, I know you've raised your hand. We have a few people that have raised their hand that I'm monitoring here.
I did. Thank you very much. All of this is very impressive. I'm excited about the growth coming to Avondale. And I had a question about what on the chart is phase 4. Is that the only space looking to be for housing?
No, it's not. We have housing. We see phase 3 right there. Thank you, Fred. A huge block of housing there with interior green courtyards opening out into that greenway as well.
Gotcha.
So yeah. So residential in phase 3 as circled here, and residential in phase 4.
Okay. And even with residential being in phase 3, we're still looking at construction not starting for what, 5 years on that?
Oh, phase 3, that could be, years down the road. Now, let me back up a second here. Everything when you get into this has tendency to change depending on market conditions, et cetera. One of the things that just started to get into with the developer for phase 1 is that, do we want to incorporate some residential in phase 1 as well? Okay, he's not sure, because I'm telling you, the market is really topsy-turvy. COVID just knocked everybody down. And so they're rethinking, how to use regular office space, because everybody's Zooming like we are. Okay, you need all that office space. Then you have research coming in big, biolabs, et cetera. That's part of it. But then possibly there's a potential, there's an opportunity to incorporate maybe some residential of some scale into phase one. We have not resolved that yet.
Mhm. I would say
Franz,
with the, go ahead, sorry.
Francis, Bill, why don't you give them a quick shot at some of the other three quads, because the residential is not just happening in that one, it's happening in one of the other quads as we talk now. It's in the planning like everything else is. So this is not the only quad, young man, is going to have residential in it. There's residential in some of the other four corners.
Yeah, and the southwest quad.
Southwest quad primarily, yeah.
Right.
And we have another question here in the chat. I just want to make sure we get to a variety of questions today. Is will the green space be developed in stages with each phase? I know you might want to cover that, Franz. Is when?
Yes, it's we sort of just breezed by that, but yes, it will be. It'll be developed in phases for sure.
So you see how the phase one is on Borman, but it also includes the park space across from it. And then also includes this connecting Borman Street, but then it doesn't make sense to do the ponds until you do phase two. So the ponds are part of then the second phase. That, because it has such a tight relationship to the buildings.
And we had a few more questions submitted around who will pay for the green space and who will manage the green space and ensuring community access to the green space. So paying for and management of the green space, well, Tom, would you like to contribute? No, I'm just kidding. But really the cost of this green space, imagine with all that we would like to do, is quite expensive. And so, right now we've been in a process of seeking various grants, as well as some funding from the state of Ohio to continue our design efforts. But right now we are still, and we will be for quite some time, in the design phase. And we're looking at what management looks like with potentially a public-private partnership. So we don't really have more information on that aspect of it today, but assuring that the community access part of it, that's being done in our planning process now.
There's lots of models emerging throughout the country where spaces like this that are totally publicly accessible all the time have some sort of public-private management. We don't think it would be turned over to the city of Cincinnati, but it would probably be some kind of a public-privately maintained space. But we don't know yet. That's a great question, but we don't have a good answer right now.
Brooke, may I ask a question? Russ Harrison, Avondale Development Corp. Or you already have a list of people waiting?
Go ahead. There was somebody that had their hand up, but you put your hand back down. So if you want to put it back up after Russ, you can.
I think first let me applaud the efforts that are being done today. And the way we're looking at this from the Avondale Development Corporation is that you're getting way out ahead toward public review and comment, as well as association and participation. And so for that, I thank you for doing that. Some of these phases will be down the road, as Franz mentioned, but I think linking it today so we can see it, feel it, almost touch it, and comment on it is very important. And I think it allows us to formulate questions. I'm sure there will be others after this meeting today, but I think the effort today is a great one, and actually allows us to envision what's coming and in what phase and action step. I do have one question. We know that, as Franz mentioned, the pandemic and the economic downturn has affected quite a few proposed projects throughout the city. Uptown is no different. I want to assume that the node development may affect this development, or am I too, or can I be corrected that some of this will work simultaneously?
I mean, ask that again, Russ. What are you saying? Well, the node. This is the node here.
The four quadrants, so to
Oh,
speak.
okay.
The actual
Oh,
quadrant.
okay.
got it.
I apologize.
Yeah.
Well, I know that some of that is being rescheduled now due to, as we said, the pandemic and other forces
Yeah.
around the economy. I'm curious if that affects this actual effort that's going in the gateway process you're discussing today, or if in fact some of this will run concurrently with that.
I think when talking just in the Northeast right now, I know talking to the developers for that, they really want to probably kick loose on their phase one. There's a lot of infrastructure work needs to occur in phase one.
Sure.
They want to kick loose in that sometime next year. Okay.
Okay.
And so then you're looking at least, a 2-year build period for that. So, and then figuring out what happens after that. Again, Russ, as you know, market, what is the product, what are the absorption rates, lease rates, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's all up in the air. And of course, if another one of these projects starts, let's say in the southwest quadrant at the same time, okay, it's very important in this business not to oversaturate market with product at one time, okay, because you compete against yourself then. So it's a balancing act. In terms of timing though, phase one for this Northeast quad is received its zoning approvals already, about, a year and a half ago. Okay, but it was put on hold because of the virus. So that will probably be likely the next thing to kick loose, phase one.
I appreciate that, Franz. Thanks.
One thing we're seeing in the United States is that the demand for laboratory and R&D space is going up quite a bit, and because of the pandemic. And I think Cincinnati is particularly well positioned with the universities and the hospitals here to be a real, player in that market, if you will. So you might see a demand increasing more for kind of laboratory type space and maybe a little less for office space or some kind of hybrid office lab, which is a new emerging thing. So you couldn't have a better location than this for that, with given the hospitals and universities proximity.
Blackstone about a month ago dumped in billions of dollars of assets into biotech space. So that's telling you where the market's going.
Yeah.
I hate to just jump on in there, but I'm kind of curious. Do you already have do you have planned occupancies already, or is this still just an idea as far as who will be occupying these spaces?
It's just an idea. We're just looking at, like for instance, down here in the Southeast quad where you have under construction right now, you have UC building their building, which is the Digital Futures.
All right.
And then over the office building 2, which will be starting one of these days. That's probably going to get into, we think, more of research and the biotechnology. And because it seems to be a coming thing. So when we say that we're looking at biotech, we think that is really going to be the big thing for innovation districts now in the foreseeable future. Now, it's not to say it's not going to include such thing as technology driven in terms of computing or other technologies. It's just that we don't think that right now, none of us think that there's going to be this classic need for cubicles and offices where you push paper. A lot of that is being transferred out into basically people work from the house. And it's now the need for office space is driven by the highly technologically driven biotechnology industry.
I would also add that the need for the Innovation Greenway itself is quite critical to these components, as many people can work from home now and or move to other cities because they're able to do remote work. So as we are thinking through programming and the people living in Avondale and Uptown, the Greenway is really critical to having a space in place for people to convene, whether they are working in these buildings or whether you live and work in the neighborhood. So we are definitely taking that into consideration as we're looking at the streetscape as well.
another one of my concerns is all of this space used to be residential. And I'm starting to see the landscape of what I call the concrete jungle just coming in more and more. I do appreciate the green space and the design. When we talk about residency, do you have an idea on how many families will be able to occupy the space that was once residential?
No, I don't.
Is that room for negotiation? Because it looks like it's a lot more office than it is residential. Am I correct there?
That's correct. And that was the focus, though, of this entire innovation district, these 4 quadrants, is to focus on not necessarily office, but into a mixture of uses such as residential and office space. Now, it's not going to be single family homes. And also right now is the condo market is not real good. It's not to say that these residential blocks or areas we have them could not turn at some point in time, by the time they get done, into condos. But in terms of single family detached, no, that will not be coming back in this area.
But I mean, this building right here and this building up here, that each of those could be, I don't know, a couple hundred units of multifamily housing possibly. So
Yeah.
that's you know, call it 300 to 400 units of housing just on those 2 parcels right there. That's a fairly significant, plus the Southwest Quad is going to have residential too. So there will be residential, but it's not meant to be primarily residential, as Franz says. It's more of an employment concept.
I can appreciate your remarks in that regard. Of course, we all have to acknowledge that should those 300 to 400 units materialize, that also means that, you know, location, which means this is not going to be the low rent district. So then you're going to have to hope that you've got a workforce inclusive of some of the folks living in the community who can then afford to live in that new housing. And of course, that's a conversation for another time, but all of those factors come into play.
There will be, but there will be, we've already talked about this very early on before we even had the concept, is that it goes along with Russ Hairston and Avondale Development Corporation about their housing strategy and their housing plan in place, and about including as requirement of development these residential components and affordability, percentage that are affordable, what we call workforce and whatever. And Ross, I don't know if you want to speak to that briefly.
Yeah, Franz, I think we are in the process now of having completed our quality of life neighborhood plan as well as our housing strategy. We're now looking at implementing that strategy. And as more information comes out on this process involving the gateway, we will include that in our strategy, and certainly that will be made available to the public. And that's forthcoming in 21. We're going to do that during 21. And actually, we hope to do that sometime around June or July of this year. We're working on it as we speak. And we're working with the Community Building Institute out of Xavier University towards that effort, as well as the Uptown Consortium, who's been very, very helpful to us towards that endeavor. But make no doubt about it, we understand that Avondale is being primed to be a great neighborhood with the Innovation Corridor coming in, as well as with the gateway information, as well as the use of green space. And we certainly want to make sure that it is inclusive as well as available to the residents. And our job will be to seek that and to work with the parties that be toward bringing that about. We got a lot of work to do, but we are very excited and happy that we are at the table. We've been given the green light on any and all information we need to date. And we look forward to producing something involving the community as well as the community council in the days and months coming ahead, with that actual snapshot of projection as well as actual moving forward.
Thank you, Russ. And to wrap up today, I think a few hands went down. It looks like some people were able to ask questions, and we've answered most of the questions in the chat today. If there are any further questions that come about as you are thinking about the presentation that we've had today, feel free to reach out. Most of you have my email address, and I'm happy to have a conversation with you off of this Zoom call as well. And we thank you for coming and hearing the update, as well as engaging with feedback. So if there's no further questions, we'll wrap up today. But like, what was that?
I'd like to ask one follow-up.
Yes.
I'm really encouraged by the fact that the green space, which is this whole conversation's about, that between phase 1 and phase 2, that section will get developed kind of concurrent with that development. My follow-up question there, though, is there an assumption of either state, county, or city funding to do that? And if that assumption is there and it isn't forthcoming, what happens?
So we're looking at different funding opportunities now, whether that's locally, city, state, or nationally across the board, funding for inclusive green space. So as we develop this, obviously we're also in tight communication with the private developer that will be developing the buildings surrounding the Greenway. And so they also, Franz on our team has worked with them very closely throughout this process, and they also see this as a benefit to the site. So Franz, I don't know if you have anything you want to add about that.
Yeah, one of the things we put out there early on and working with developers, because they are a partner in this as well, is a way to actually implement the strategy for the Greenway and everything that goes with it. And there may be such things where there is the developer kicks in a percentage of rents. It's sort of like I would call a CAM charge on an office building, common area maintenance, those type of things, which would help underwrite and provide funds for ongoing operations. And for construction would be the same sort of thing. We haven't reached a formula on that or total agreement on that. But as Brooke has said, we're investigating many different avenues. And eventually we'll reach a point where we'll crack the nut on financing and funding this.
Is the recording is going to be available on the website? Is there any hard copy of this presentation like there was the last one, I think?
So we'll have this uploaded to our YouTube page, and then I'll talk with our team and hopefully send a follow-up of maybe a few renderings to the group that attended today.
That'd be great. Easy to share with others.
For sure. All right, well, thank you all for your questions and for jumping on today. I know we're ending a few minutes early, but we're happy to hear everyone's feedback, and we definitely took notes. And if there's any other aspects of the programmable spaces that people come across ideas or as they're thinking about this space, feel free to reach out, because we're kind of keeping track of that. Even though the green space will not be up tomorrow, we want to plan now for what that can look like. So thank you all for joining us.
Great job, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.